What is that noise?
This is the ghost.
Oh! Oh, hey! Hey, you all still talking in here?
What are you doing?
Her back went out, and I just did the best thing, which is get right on the muscles so they don't seize up.
Just add some heat to it.
Merry Christmas.
Next year, I'm gonna ask Santa for breast implants because I'm impatient with my body.
So good. Ah, gosh! It's gone into a real bad spasm, so I put a yoga move on her.
Christmas markets in Germany look like this. Why, ladies and gentlemen? Why? Why are there barriers up? Why are there huge road blocking barriers up? They can paint them any candy cane color paint they want. Why are there massive barriers being installed around the Christmas markets in some of the oldest cities in Christendom, frankly? In the cradle, the birthplace of Christendom. Why? Why is that? For the first time in history, the famous Christmas markets of Germany have ram road blocking vehicle barriers. It's because Germany is quickly ceasing to become a Christian nation. It's because Germany is 20% Muslim now. And those Muslims tend to attack markets where there are a bunch of Christian children at them. Well, that's a horrible what? Let's talk about the why. And the why is because Germany is suicidal in their immigration policies, bringing people in that were incongruent with Western freedoms and society. That's it. It's as simple as. And they decided to let people in that were eventually, over a long enough period of time, going to revolt and attack, parasitically, like a virus against the hosts. This is, of course, a horrible evil, and it's played out time and time again in data all across Europe. And I'll show you some European data. Here, this is from Denmark. These are the populations of crime in Denmark. So when people move to Denmark, what does the crime rate look like per group, per cluster from each individual country? Maybe you'll be shocked by this. Maybe you won't. But I think that we can all agree that less crime is something that we want in our countries. And so you're going to have to ask the question, why would we bring people into our countries to make them far more dangerous and horrifying? And that's a question that we're going to struggle with today on the show. The answer is obvious, by the way, as to why it's happening. Let's go ahead and look. What are the countries of origin of the highest crime? Kuwait, Somalia, Lebanon, Tunisia, Jordan, Uganda, Iraq, Morocco, Algeria, Ethiopia, Syria, Afghanistan, Egypt, Iran, Turkey, Kenya, Ghana, Myanmar, Pakistan, Tanzania, Chile, Israel. Okay, well, then there's your top 20, let's just say. Nigeria, Bosnia, Herzegovina, okay. Well, this is a great question. What do the vast majority, what do 90% of these countries have in common in the top 20? And then you can scroll down to the bottom 20 and you can see, it's all European countries. The United States is down near the very bottom. Australia, Japan at the very tippy top. The Japanese, very orderly in the way that they live life. Very congruent, frankly, with Western society in a unique way. Higher than actually Western society in some regards, I think many would argue. When it comes to cleanliness or when it comes to order or when it comes to rule following, the Japanese are peak. It used to be the British, but they've sunken as well. What are all the most horrifying countries that make a place, again, this is Denmark, crime rate, make a place, this is true across all Western societies. All Western societies have maps and data, if they're man enough to actually publish it, that look exactly like this. They all come from, all of these are Muslim countries, not majority Muslim countries, because there's no such thing. A Muslim country is a purist Muslim country. What happens in a Muslim country is there is really no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of religion. There's no women's rights, right? Like there are none of the freedoms or liberties that we typically experience in the Western Hemisphere, in the Anglosphere, that we've grown up with, the bread and the bones for not just like your grandpappy's age, but like you're talking about like John Locke. You're talking about going back like 1600. You're talking about hundreds of years ago. Your greatest great grandfather and grandmother were like absorbing these freedoms. Were absorbing the worldviews of Adam Smith and some of the great proselytizers of the day, the founders of our nation, completely imbued with English thought that wrote the Magna Carta, that inspired some French, some English, the philosophies of our founders, and that's been bred in the bone in us. That's why we believe the way that we do about private property. That's why we don't see women as property. That's why we don't see human beings as property. You know that, yes, there was slavery in America. Yes, it happened a long time ago. Yes, we gave a lot in this country to abolish it. Nobody ever thanks us for that. Yes, we abolished it 100 plus, nearly going on 200 years ago. The English Christian Empire was the first to abolish it, followed quickly by America. Nobody gave up more than America to actually abolish slavery. 500,000 Americans dead, bloodiest civil war, arguably in human history, certainly in the developed world. But everyone agrees that slavery is evil. It's unchristian. This against my religion, okay? And so, yes, slavery is evil, and it's good that we abolish it, obviously. Everyone would I will join hands with anyone that says, like, slavery is wrong, we shouldn't do it. Okay, good. We're so obsessed with this practice that was done away with 200 years ago in our nation at great cost, righteously, and nobody ever focuses on the fact that, like, in these countries here that are here on the top of the crime line, that slavery is legal. Slavery, like modern day slavery, there's like 10 million people, according to just the round estimates, that are enslaved today in Africa, in the sort of the Muslim and African diaspora. Do you know that, like, the horrors of slavery that, you have to crack open a book and see illustrations? That's real today. You just go see it happening today. And nobody ever is concerned about that. Why? You're not allowed to be. Because we want to import those people into our lands. What? Seems totally antithetical to the West. Why would we bring slavers back over here? Didn't we pay a high enough price already? But that's precisely what we're doing. And you need to start asking some really tough questions about, like, what exactly is the purpose of immigration? Like, is the purpose of immigration to go have to relitigate whether slavery is good or whether women are property? Is that the point? At a speech earlier this month, I got a chance to travel with J.D. Vance to Ole Miss and listen to him talk about the 1924 Immigration Act. I said, we got to go back to that. And these are the kind of things that are just way over a lot of people's heads. Are people even alive from 1924? I mean, doubt it if, you're 100 years old, right? You're over 100 years old if you were alive in 1924. So nobody really remembers it. Nobody knows what it is. But it's worth, like, illustrating why did J.D. Vance care so much about this, and why did he bring it up inside of this stadium packed with 10,000 kids when he knows that, a lot of people's eyes are going to glaze over when you start talking about treaties and laws from 1924, the Immigration Act of 1924. Calvin Coolidge signed it into law, and what it effectively said was America's full. At this point, America was full, but it was full of a lot of different European cultures that were brought here with extremely heightened senses of their own enclave. It's something that we're experiencing right now. And history has a tendency to repeat itself. It has a tendency to repeat itself in 100-year cycles. Pretty remarkable that, but it does. And at this time, Calvin Coolidge was looking out at like wars between the Irish and the Italians. I guess they're still doing it on the East Coast, but like literal wars between the Irish and the Italians, totally in wholly German-speaking enclaves throughout the Midwest, where you weren't even allowed in if you weren't German. That's a matter of fact. Like colonies that refused entry to people that didn't speak German. Was looking through French Louisiana, the Norse countries, sort of taking over what would be like very preferential lands that sort of mirrored Norse culture and the Norse economy and the Norse weather systems up north. That's why you can still have like you still see Swedish villages all throughout like upper Michigan and Minnesota. And President Calvin Coolidge, while it wasn't Somalia at the time, he did see like effectively the boiling pot of Europe, which was in between two massive world wars ripped and destroyed Europe forever. Obviously, World War I and World War II just ended what we know as like great Europe. You wouldn't if you traveled back in time and saw Europe in like the early 1900s, wouldn't recognize it. It's like a Disney movie, right? It's like a land that is inconceivable in its cultural majesty, beauty, and what you could rightly call diversity, actually, of thought and rich culture. It's been atomized, it's been destroyed, and they committed suicide over it. It's just a matter of fact. It's terrible. But the point is that all of those rich and imbued cultures, many of them non-English speaking, frankly, from Europe, came to America, washed ashore on America because Europe had become quite crowded and stifling for economic activity. And Calvin Coolidge, pardon the dad pun here, literally said, "Cool it." He said, "Stop. We can't continue like this. We're going to break apart as America again. We just fought a civil war. We're going to break apart as a country. We already are doing that. We're going to fight another civil war, and it's just going to be like Europe all over again. We're just going to recreate the problems of Europe here. So we're stopping all immigration." He plainly stated, "New arrivals must be limited to our own capacity to absorb them. America must be kept American. For this purpose, it is now necessary to enact a policy of restricted immigration." The 1924 Act passed the House and the Senate, overwhelming support. Democrats and Republicans agreed. That's something, of course, that you wouldn't get today, and we'll cover exactly why. The bill introduced tight immigration quotas, new visa requirements, border patrol, outright banned immigration from the majority of countries on Earth, frankly, that we viewed as incompatible with our culture. Dramatically reduced the number of people coming into the country to net zero, right? So there was a small trickle of immigrants that were allowed from high culture, high society, Western societies, English-speaking societies, but it was like effectively at the rate of like people are dying here in our country, and we're bringing in a few more to just sort of even it out, right? By 1940s and 50s, American society thrived with a booming economy, rising middle class, common culture, virtually purely homogeneous culture, frankly. You had, I think it was somewhere close to like 98 to 97% like Christian. Severely limited immigration. The act was in place until 1965, when the imbeciles in charge, that generation has since died, can't blame the boomers for this or anything like that, they were children at this time, but the imbeciles in charge, because they were drunk on their own power after winning 2 world wars. Do we seem like a country that won a world war? Do we seem like we're dominant in our culture or our understanding of who we are as a people? No, we do not. Neither do the countries of Europe, who won or lost the wars, frankly. Since then, we've experienced decades of historic immigration, both legal and illegal, and today we have higher levels of foreign-born populations than the early 1900s by both raw numbers and percentage of populations. What I'm saying is it's repeated itself. The mass immigration has also included vastly different cultures than the mostly Europeans that we accepted then, and obviously, once again, we need to make a national policy shift, and it should be bipartisan. It's time for another immigration act. So there you go. You can see the little political cartoon of the time. There's a political cartoon that was published in 1924 that shows the huddled masses and refuse of the world wishing to come to America for a better life, and a gate being put upon them saying 3% per year, and we're going to be very, very choosy and very picky. I bring this up to say that what President Trump is on the precipice of doing is something like this. And we're going to start calling for, on our show, a new Immigration Act. We can just use the language of the 1924 Immigration Act, quite frankly, because we are witnessing the exact same problem. We are witnessing our country come apart at the seams. We are witnessing entire enclaves of peoples who are wholly foreign, not only to our land, people, native, tongue, but also to our culture. And it is really ugly and horrible to watch great American cities, high trust societies. We're just going to take, for example, and pick on purposefully Minneapolis, Minnesota. As we talked about before in the show, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Minnesota as a whole was seen as sort of a fiefdom of Germanic, Swedish, and Norse culture. It sort of reflects, in a way, the climate of the Norse countries, and it was a famous landing ground for Lutherans, sort of an enclave itself. Today, of course, it reflects none of that high trust society, and that also made, of course, Minnesota very clean, tidy, high functioning, virtually zero crime, high trust society in those days. But those days are long gone. Our friend Nick Shirley just traveled to the streets of Minneapolis to detail what it looks like today, what has happened to Minnesota, Minneapolis in particular. Minneapolis decided to absorb, during the Bush and Obama years, hundreds of thousands of Somalis. It's hard to think of a culture that is more opposite than the American founding, than the Anglosphere diaspora that birthed our founding fathers in this country, but certainly birthed our native heritage. Somalia isn't really a country. It's more like a region of nomadic, warring Muslim terrorist organizations who fight for just basic resources, incredible levels of starvation, murder, child sacrifice, piracy. The entire country is, like borders the sea. You can see it on a map. A perfect place for a massive shipping port or capacity to do trade in and out of. There's not a single modern port in all of Somalia. There's barely electricity. It's a totally collapsed and failed state. Frankly, it's not really even a real country. It begs the question, of course, why would we be bringing anyone over from this land if the purpose of immigration is to enrich our nation and not the people that we're bringing over? And that's really the rub there, is that the only people getting rich off this are the actual Somalis who have zero interest in being Americans. And they say that proudly. They pledge allegiance to Somalia. They changed the Minnesota flag to look like a Somali flag. And so this is what failed assimilation, but also the humiliation of the people of Minnesota and then, by extension, all of America looks like. Here we go.
What's it like being a Muslim here in the United States?
I'm not speaking English, only one Somali language.
What does it mean to you to be a part of Islam?
I don't know, I'm not speaking English very well.
How are you? Do any of you speak English? English? No. Can women speak on camera? No.
The religion.
I kept going because I wanted to speak with some more of the elders here to see if they could share their story about coming here from Somalia and how they've seen the rise firsthand. However, none of them spoke English. How are you? Can I ask any of you guys some questions? No? Speak English?
English no.
No? Do any of you speak English? After a few interviews, somebody came up to us angry because we were asking people about the rise of Islam inside this community.
My name is Dick Shirley. What are you doing? My name is Dick Shirley. I'm a YouTuber. We're doing a video on the rise of Islam here in the United States.
The rise of Islam?
Yeah, it's the #1 converting religion.
The rise of Islam. Make it make sense for me.
Yeah, it's the #1 it's the #1 converting religion in the United States, so we're doing a top
the
subject on it.
#1 converting religion in the United States.
It's like the #1 growing religion. So
wait, isn't it after Christ?
What?
Isn't it after Christ?
This guy wouldn't show his face on camera, and this conversation kept going for a few minutes, and he demanded that we deleted the footage of the interviews that we took here on the street. I said no, and he said, you better go, and we're gonna make sure you leave. I've never been in a situation like that while I've been filming, where somebody comes out of nowhere and wants to take the footage. I was watching a video prior to this video, and there is a Somali gang war going on here inside of these apartment complexes, apparently. I think we just went upon a gang, and I didn't know that they were a gang. And right now, he said, you better leave, and we're gonna make sure you get out of here. So right now, there is somebody following from behind, making sure that we get out of this place. Not the most friendly welcome here into this part of Minnesota.
Outside of Somalia, the USA is the #1 place of residence for Somalis. Why? You could obviously do a bunch of, go into the IQ numbers. You could go into all of the fraud numbers. We're going to do that in just a second. You could talk about the incredible incidents of fraud and crime that Somali populations have brought to Minneapolis. It's just empirical. I mean, listen, the data's all there. I'll read to you all of the DOJ filings, and we'll be happy to in just a moment. A piece of empirical data shocked me, however, about the second cousin marriage rates among Somali populations. We asked Grok about this. Danny, you're going to have to grab the actual Grok analysis. But it comes from some peer-reviewed studies from the late 90s, early 2000s, saying somewhere in the range of 40% of the Somali population is based on first cousin marriages or second cousin marriages. Don't get mad at me, you know. This is the data. So the precise data is limited. But a 2019 study of Ethiopian Somalis found 48% are products of first or second cousin marriages. The average inbreeding coefficient higher than typical second cousin offspring regional rates, similar cultures. Okay. Well, how about this? Here's like a great, here's a fantastic rule. In Somalia, a place where, I mean, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, you know, to be deported there. However, I don't ever plan on visiting. In Somalia, since that's their land and I guess like their place, they can just kind of do what they want. I can disagree with it from afar. I can be upset about it, I guess. I can tweet about it. But I have no say there because I'm not Somali and I don't ever plan on living there or visiting, frankly, ever. They can just keep doing that, and that's up to them. That's their business. But why bring it here? Sharia law is incompatible with Western culture. It's not in favor of free speech. It's not in favor of freedom of religion. It's not in favor of separation of church and state. It's in favor of actually, forced conversions by the state. You cannot curse the name Muhammad. You cannot say certain things. You of course have rules about the relationships between men and women and children that would seem utterly abhorrent. And obviously the inbreeding coefficient here, given this study, is something that every developed culture should be rightly repulsed at, because we know scientifically this will lead to very bad results. Okay, when it comes to actually having children, if you constrict that genetic pool tightly enough, you're going to really have you're going to have horrendous results, diminishing down to effectively like just stillbirths. It's horrible. Why bring it here? And, it's frankly none of my business. I'm not here to like scold Somalia. I'm not here to scold any country. I hate that we're obsessed with Israel. I hate that we're obsessed with Ukraine. I want out. I'm so done talking about it. We have enough problems here in America, which is what President Trump put up actually this weekend in a spectacular post. Like, don't we have enough problems in America? Why are we bringing tribal blood feuds from the time of Abraham onto our shores? What good does that do for us? And more importantly, will these people ever become Americans? What I mean by that is not like the slip of paper, not like the stamp, like you're we've given you all, you're all dreamers, right? No, what I mean by that is somebody who gives up their native land and fully clings to the flag, to our culture, to our language, to our sense of rights, our ethos, our understanding of self, which is, by the way, hanging on by a thread. And the answer to that is obviously and empirically, demonstrably, no, they won't. You can see that on full display in Minneapolis, where there are complete no-go zones, where that American citizen, Nick Shirley, who has a great channel, you should follow it on YouTube, where he was incapable of even walking on the streets of his country. Also, look at how filthy and dingy and dirty all the shots are. And the reality is that when you bring the third world here, they don't suddenly become first world. You've just brought the worst qualities of the third world and brought them into the first world, and they'll stay third world. The third world is the third world because of the cultures, the peoples, the traditions of the third world. That's why we call it that. We don't dump all of our trash in our rivers and just expect the water to carry the mountains of refuse out to the ocean. That's not what we do here. We like being tidy. We like things being clean. We like using we like being sanitary and using toilets. The biggest black pill, I guess you could call it a brown pill, frankly, is pooping in India. I didn't actually know how bad it was. It's something like 60-70% of people don't use toilets. But by choice. They're not available, but they prefer open defecation. We've presented the studies here. I'm not trying to be, whatever you'd want to call it. And if you're offended by the data, then that's on you, man. That's not on me. The prevalence and burden of no toilet households in India. Analysis. Okay. Dig into the data here, or don't, frankly, not before lunch. But you'll find that it's grotesque. But it's a major question. Like, if we've solved these problems in ourselves, and it took a lot, we spilled a lot of blood and spent a lot of time, a lot of effort solving these problems as an American people, and we're certainly not perfect, but we did end slavery, and we do have an abundance of rights for all peoples, and we have, I think, what could be described as the most the most metaphysical representation of Christendom in our American, the ethos of Christendom in our American documents, governing documents, meaning all of the qualities that make Christianity the most peaceful religion on earth, have been imbued in our nation and its governance, and have proven out to be well worth the wait and the effort to get us here, then why bring people in that undermine all of that? It's a suicidal practice. It's something that isn't going well, according to the New York Times. I mean, this is just wild. I can't believe that this is real. How fraud swamped Minnesota's social services system. How fraud swamped Minnesota's social services system on Tim Walz's watch. My goodness. our friend Chris Rufo published this article in the City Journal talking about how Minnesota taxpayers are the largest funders of Somali terrorism. How they do this? Well, the Somali populations of Minnesota found yet another loophole in the taking advantage of the good-hearted Christian taxpayer of America, and by using coercion and by using just flat-out fraud, claiming that all of their children were autistic, they were able to accelerate the autism payments from the welfare state of Minnesota from $3 million in 2018 to $400 million in 2025. Enormous amounts of that money has gone back to Somalia in the form of like duffel bags filled with cash to fund Islamic terrorism. Is that what the people of Minnesota pay their taxes for? Exactly. Do we have that DOJ filing and the related fraud from Feed the Children? One of the largest COVID-19 frauds, and there were plenty of them from all different groups of people all over the country. But in Somalia, mini Somalia, which is what it is, and it just belabors the point one final time. They didn't come here to assimilate to America. They came here to recreate Somalia. That's what's on full display in these videos. What's on full display is that they have zero interest in speaking our language, our customs, our traditions. They have full interest and total interest in staying in Minneapolis, which is, nothing like Somalia and its weather, climate, conditions, culture, habitat, to get something that, arid and dry. It'd be more like moving to the desert. That would be like if you want to really recreate Somalia, you move to the desert. No, they go to Minneapolis because that's where their culture is. And they have created almost a entire parallel society there that is Somali and not American. And this, of course, should concern all of us greatly. I'm paraphrasing Elon Musk here, but the nations are its people. And he used this wonderful metaphor in a speech, and I'm going to steal it right now. If you took all of Italy, you took all the Italians in Italy, and you took them out of Italy, okay? So there wasn't a single Italian left in Italy. And some people are like, that's it. Oh, that sounds like paradise. ALX is here shaking his head. Yeah, ALX is very Italian, loves going to Italy. Let's say you take every Italian out of Italy and you put them in Florida. This has happened in some parts of Florida. I mean, go check Boca Raton. But you take every Italian and you drop them right into Florida, which is kind of shaped like Italy, frankly. Well, Italy isn't the rocks or the old buildings or the trees. It's the people. So every Italian moves to Florida. Florida becomes Italy. It's not kind of Italy. It's not little Italy like in New York. It's literal Italy. The songs, the food, the voices, the language, the traditions, the church, the legacies, the family, the knowledge, the sense of self, that all travels with the people. And then Italy just becomes a rock with some old ruins. And if you brought a bunch of Somalis there, it would become Somalia. It would no longer be Italy. You'd have to travel to Florida to get Italy. Right? Get it? I mean, it does make sense, actually, if you put it in those terms. And so when you bring a considerable portion of Somalia and drop them into this tight little unit in Minneapolis, what you've done is you've created Somalia there. Because the people are the actual nation, not the land. And so we must be extremely careful what people we are bringing here. We must look at their land, we must look at their nation and ask, do we want that nation here? Here's a good example. Somalia is, of course, the single most corrupt nation on earth. And now that we've brought those people here, we are getting frauds like this. Feeding our futures defendant, sentenced to 10 years in prison. The White House rapid response tweet, ALX, there was a White House rapid response tweet that identified that 47 out of the 50 people charged in the single greatest COVID-19 PPP fraud, were all of Somali descent, East African descent. So White House rapid response, it's like an actual account. So go to the account and then you can go through. Why don't we read some of the names? Let me just scroll through it. Wrong one. 47. Yeah, there you go. So you can go through. You need to find the actual tweet and then go through. And I'd just like to maybe pop up some names there. This is not a shock. Shouldn't be a shock. I mean, it should be a shock to anybody with conscience. But it's not a shock to me because this is what happens in Somalia, and we just brought Somalia here. It was a fraud where they said they were feeding children. They were feeding hundreds, if not thousands of children per day. And instead of feeding those children, they were just taking all of our money. They were just taking the money that the taxpayers were giving at the threat of the end of it's not like we had a choice. We were giving to businesses during COVID. You can just scroll through here. It's a very long list. It's going to take us a while to get through, but you'll find that, again, 47 out of the 50 people charged here are all of East African descent, where we have obviously failed nation states that subsist and culturally, quite frankly, entirely on fraud. It's a culture there. And I'm not even trying to judge it because I ain't trying to be a Somali. I'm not planning on moving there. You can go do whatever the hell you want in your country. But why do our leaders feel the compunction to bring that culture here? And what are we going to do about it? President Trump, in the wake of multiple murders and terrorist attacks and threats over the weekend, there were multiples, by the way, from Afghani nationals in this country, has decided to finally snap on the Somalis here in this country, on Minnesota writ large, and its stewardship under what he calls seriously retarded Tim Walz. I think that this is one of the single greatest posts in the history of the presidency, if not the greatest. And what it's setting us up for is a 1924 Immigration Act again. Will Democrats be on board with it? No, of course not. And that's the sad reality to the end of this story, is that Democrats will not be voting for it in a massively bipartisan way because they benefit from this. The point I'm getting at is that unfortunately one party has seen that if you import Somalis in mass, if you give them welfare, and if you're the person promising them more welfare, then they'll vote for you. And that works out great for Tim Walz. So Tim Walz is incentivized to keep that happening in spite of what it does to our nation, to our culture, to our people, and to the state of Minnesota, which is, again, a very nice place. Donald Trump has had enough of it. And in this tour de force post, he says that this is completely stupid for us and that we have been stupid in our immigration. The official United States foreign population stands at 53 million people. This is why I am calling for a 1924 Immigration Act. We need a time of zero immigration, net zero immigration, negative immigration, and then remigration, which is critical, which he gets to at the very end of this. You can see only reverse migration can fully cure the situation. Other than that, have a happy Thanksgiving. We need a time period where we lock down welfare benefits to people who are here illegally. And we need a time when people need to start asking the question, like, is it, am I happier here or would I be happier back in Somalia, for instance? We need to end the goodie train that keeps them here so that they can commit the frauds that send them home with duffel bags of cash to fund Muslim terrorism and child sacrifice. That's not what our tax dollars should be going for. Here a lot of people have read a lot of like different quotes from this, and obviously there are some juicy ones when it comes to Ilhan Omar and her swaddling hijab, as President Trump says, or the seriously retarded governor of Minnesota. Trump defended all of it, and we'll play those clips for you in a second. But what I want to get to here is the real root of all of this, which is the toxic empathy of Christians. And that's what's really being preyed on here. What really gets preyed on in our nation with our immigration policies, especially since the end of World War II, is taking advantage of the Christian sensibility, the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, the Good Samaritan, that has been wholly and completely abused by our leaders. And it's something that President Trump hits at here that I loved about this post. Even as we've progressed technologically, immigration policy has eroded these gains, living conditions for many. I will permanently pause all migration from third world countries to the United States for the system to fully recover, which is exactly what we need in 1924, exactly what we need now. He's going to denaturalize migrants who undermine domestic tranquility and deport foreign nationals who are public charge and security risk non-compatible with Western civilization. Yes, this is exactly correct. Non-compatible with Western civilization needs to be the aim for all of these deportations. In the United States, this is quite a long post, so I'm trying to remember exactly where it was. But okay, here it is, right here. Thank you. They and their children are supported through the massive payments from patriotic American citizens. It was at the top. I thought it was actually near the bottom, but anyway, it's quite a long post. They and their children, here it is. Here's where Trump really cooks. Are supported through the massive payments of patriotic American citizens who, because of their beautiful hearts, do not want to openly complain or cause trouble in any way, shape, or form. They put up with what has happened to our country, but it's eating them alive to do so. A migrant earning $30,000 with a green card will get roughly $50,000 yearly benefits for their family. The real migrant population is much higher. The refugee burden is leading to the cause of social dysfunction in America, something that did not exist after World War II. Failed schools, high crime, urban decay, overcrowded hospitals, housing shortages, and large deficits. As we have said time and time again, every problem in our country can be alleviated and ameliorated through mass deportation. Every single problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we stand, and President Trump is not backing down. President Trump has gone off on his enemies on this front. Ilhan Omar has finally said it. President Trump saying in a gaggle on Air Force One last night. If it's true that she married her brother, and this is the way that Trump always says these things, it is true. I know that from DHS sources. DHS has the documents. I know this because a whistleblower came to me to say that they have actually delivered the documents that prove it to the White House. So that's remarkable. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. That the DHS documentation of Ilhan Omar's, not only that, but egregious, systematic immigration fraud in order to bring her family over in chain migration is well documented within DHS. I mean, you can see the marriage certificates right here. They're publicly available. It's not like I'm sneaking in. I'm so smart. I've snuck all this information out, out of the Alamo. Here it is. Strangely, marrying her brother in a Christian marriage in a Christian church, isn't that something? So that they don't offend their actual, because it just doesn't, our traditions and our churches are irrelevant to them. The covenant of marriage is, of course, irrelevant to Ilhan Omar. This is just plainly and prima facie immigration fraud.